Hey there, nerds. Jimmy Palmquist here with another edition of Two Nerdy Dads. And with me, as always, we have Jason Applegate. Say hey, Jason.
Hey everybody.
So we are quickly getting into the summer as we just passed Memorial Day. Obviously, several big blockbuster movies are coming out. And I've got to believe this is Mr. Applegate's favorite time of the year because it's the end of the school year. What say you,
Yes.
Jason?
Yes. Well, my seniors are already done. So there's some of them that have already departed. And yeah, I've only got, about 2 more weeks left. So this one, next one, and then it's exams. So basically 2 more weeks. Super excited. Love the summertime as a teacher, obviously. But it's good to be able to spend a lot of time with the family. Definitely. Don't get to see them as often during the school year because we're both so busy. My wife and I both teach and we do theater stuff. So, I mean, there's some days we don't get home till, kids are in bed. But that's how it works, man.
Completely understand. That's why they made summers.
That is right.
So what do we
uh,
have on the docket today?
well, I thought first let's talk a little bit more Mad Max because I actually had the opportunity to go and see that this weekend, and I really, really, really liked it. My wife hated it. She was so good to like go to the movie, and the whole time I'm looking over at her, and she's just like, and I'm
That's
like, thank
funny.
you, thank
Well,
you
that's
for coming.
I'm glad to hear that because I was curious because I've read several articles where it's a feminist movie, and I'm
Yeah.
like, really? Because it's high octane, like
Hmm.
action packed dude movie, and I
Yeah.
understand the argument, but I was very curious to hear what a normal, non uber nerdy female thought of it, and it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah, she was not a huge fan of it because of the the plot. I think the stuff that we talked about. Like, I mean, she thought it was interesting. It was entertaining. She didn't dislike it as much as I think she thought she was going to. She also is not a huge fan of violence, which I think it was more that she was anticipating there being a lot more violence than there was, because it really wasn't a terribly violent movie. I kept waiting for it to go kind of Tarantino on us, and it didn't. And there's a lot of suggestive violence, but nothing that was really like gore all over the place, bad. And so I think that was part of it. She kept like anticipating that was going to happen, and she really doesn't like that. But she did appreciate, I think, that some of the feminist themes that were in the film. She really liked the strong female protagonist that you had, that was leading driving the war machine and leading these women, who are basically, it was a metaphor for human trafficking. I mean, they're these, concubines for, for the bad guy, and she's trying to get them out of there. And even they weren't, initially the first time you see them, they're hosing themselves down, and it's a little sort of that very stereotypical male gaze, like, oh, look at these women. But they quickly established them, I felt like, as pretty intriguing characters. They all had different personalities. They were more than just good looking women and sexual objects, I felt. I mean, is it like groundbreaking? No, obviously not, but it was kind of interesting. And then of course the ending, the way that it concludes, without spoiling too much. I don't think it's a spoiler to assume that the good guys win, but when those characters are being raised on the platform, and it's implying that they're going to be the ones that are taking over, and it's going to be a better run society, I think that's kind of a pretty cool message to sort of send, and I don't think it gets lost on anyone. The other thing that she and I were both really impressed with was Tom Hardy's performance. I
Mhm.
really thought he did an excellent job. He had very little dialogue, but he captured a little bit of what Gibson had when he had played the role, but made it his own. And then my wife particularly pointed out in the scene when it's that moment that he has with Charlize Theron's character, and he tells her his name. He didn't overact it and make it like, I'm mad, make this like melodramatic blah, makes you want to just gag yourself. And he didn't underdo it either to where it was, monotone and he was still Mr. Cool. And, it was a very human moment. And I thought that was a pretty nice little moment by him with very little dialogue as a whole throughout the whole movie, but even in that scene. And I thought it worked really well. And then I just loved the visual aspect of it. It just was just awesome. And the guitar player just steals, the flamethrowing guitar player just steals the film, man. He just does. Like every time he comes on, you're like, yeah.
It's just so it's cool because I've read a lot more about it, and they did more interviews with George Miller after the fact. And it was really cool, his choice on, like you said, visuals. He wanted it to be black and white, but black and white is not how you do wide release movies. He knows that. He's not silly. He's like, so I knew that wasn't going to be an option. And this faded sort of chrome look is so overdone. He's like, I didn't want to be in the desert and have this chrome look. That's way too much. So the colors that were available to us were sort of yellow, orange, and blue because of the sand and the sky. So like the flares and any color are in that medium, and they took it and they just made it oversaturated, just ridiculous, so that it would almost be the opposite of black and white. But he shot it so that he said, you're damn right, it'll be there on the Blu-ray. There's going to be a black and white version released.
Oh, cool.
And I'm like, that is an interesting choice.
That is interesting. Yeah, I don't think it would be too hard to change it, I would imagine, but really interesting. I loved it. I mean, I thought the style was just gorgeous. It just the whole film was gorgeous. Was it the greatest story? No, but it was, it's Mad Max. It's not meant to be, like change your life kind of a story, but it was just cool. It just from top to bottom, just art. It was very artistic.
Exactly. It's one of those movies. I think nowadays we go and we see summer blockbusters, and a lot of times we get disappointed because, as I like to say, the money wasn't on the screen. I don't know where the budget went, but it wasn't worth my money going to see that. Mad Max, nope. Every dime from that budget was on screen, and I was impressed. I would have probably paid twice as much to see it because it was so entertaining, and it was entertaining for the whole 2 hours. It wasn't like I'm checking my watch going, man, when are we out of here? And then at that, I'm still thinking about it, 2 weeks later? I mean, for an action flick, I can't say, oh, I saw The Expendables and I'm still thinking about it. No, I'm still thinking about Mad Max Fury Road because there's things I'd forgotten. Like the whole purpose for Tom Hardy to be in that truck race to stop the truck is because he's a human blood donor.
That's so cool.
That's why he's brought along, and he just happens to escape. And I totally forgot that. And it's such a weird George Miller storyline.
Yeah, the whole world that he gets to create is pretty interesting. By the way, Megan and I kept trying to figure out the war boy, the guy who ends up switching sides, the other male protagonist. Who is that? Because I kept watching. I'm like, I know that guy. Who is that actor? Do you?
All right, are you ready?
I am ready.
Have you ever seen About a Boy?
No.
Okay, we'll start there. Go see About a Boy, the English movie. It's
fantastic. I know of it.
Have you ever seen The Skins, the UK version, TV show?
No, but I know of that too. So it's that's where I probably see it.
Fantastic. It's very R-rated, but it's fantastic. Now, are you ready? You ready, Jason?
Okay. All right. I am.
It's the actor that played Beast in the X-Men movies. The first.
Okay. Yes.
Nicholas Hoult.
That's who it is. Okay, that's where I couldn't place him. Right, and
well,
he's
he doesn't look anything like it because he's all skinny, white face.
Yes. Shaved head. Yes. So, but I could tell, like, there was something about, the eyes and I was just like, where do I know that guy from? And we just couldn't place it. So, yeah.
Go see About a Boy, rent it or what have you.
Yeah, I'll put it on my list.
Like 12 or something in it. And he's got like shaggy hair. He's like a hippie.
Yeah.
You'd be like, what? That kid came from that? Are you kidding me? It's pretty funny.
That's awesome. Yeah. Speaking of, on my Netflix list, I just moved Mad Max up to the top because I'm like, I gotta rewatch the original. Strangely enough, the Road Warrior wasn't available. I don't know if it's just like so checked out or whatever, but the only option it gave me was to save it. So I was kind of disappointed. I went ahead and saved it to see if I could get the disc, but I may have to go to the old school, trek it down and actually get the check it out at like the they have Blockbusters anymore out where we have a family video, that's what it's called, where I'm at.
Gonna say, I don't know where you're gonna find it. We don't have. There's one store, I think it's called Movies and Candy, down in Henderson, that our fellow nerd Drew Marvick from Nerd Caves, he's good.
Yeah, okay.
That's the only video rental place I know of that exists anymore.
That's funny. Yeah, there's some family videos around here. In the Midwest, they're still going strong, because not everybody's got the Netflix.
Please tell me no, you're not using VHS. Please tell me that.
No, it's not. It would be a DVD. And if worse comes to worse, if they don't have it, I did see that it was I could order it on my Apple TV, and it would be like $5 or something like that. So I could break down and do that too if I need to.
That to me is still one of the best action flicks. Again, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is one of the best action flicks ever made.
Cool.
But speaking of George Miller, I don't know if you've heard this news. They are working on a documentary that focuses on the Justice League movie that was never made.
Oh, I heard about that.
Direct. And I'm excited to see this because for the last 20 years, he's basically been focusing on kids' movies. And this was going to be, about 10 years ago, maybe even more, because it was sort of put the kibosh on it because of Christopher Nolan. He wanted to only have the Batman movies out at the time. So George Miller's Justice League was canned, but it was going to be his first action movie in a long time, and it had nothing to do with Mad Max. So I'm really curious to see how it was going, how far it got, what happened, because I know I've seen cast photos where all the characters were in the photo and they had been cast. So I'm very curious.
Yeah, I've heard rumors about the costumes, and just how out there they were. That initially, I think they had shown one of the actors the Batman costume, and he was like, "Whoa!" And DC was like, "No," and that was part of it too. Was that it was so out there, but that's what Miller wanted to do. And seeing Mad Max, it's like, man, I wonder what that would have been like. I think it was one of those things where it might have been like the coolest thing ever and would have totally taken superhero films in a different direction, or it would be what I'm afraid Suicide Squad's going to be. And it just is like, ooh, let's just forget that happened.
Well, and seeing how Warner Brothers were so open to sort of do a alternate universe with Christopher Nolan, I have to imagine that's what George Miller was going for, was sort of his version, his spin on Justice League, and not necessarily something straight out of the comic books.
No, I think you're right with that. And for some reason, I don't know if it's just that I am a fan of this, but I want to say that it was it was like a steampunk kind of feel to it. Like that was what the costumes were. They had this sort of like mechanical gears and like this kind of throwback sort of feel to it. But that could just be that I'm just making that crap up and thought that would be really cool. But I want to say I'd heard that.
I hope so, because one of my biggest pet peeves is steampunk. I
really
hate steampunk.
Really?
Oh my God! Not everything has to be made with steam. Let's not. Why? Why are we imagining? Why not just do? Hey, you know what? Let's go for solar power. Let's do solar power. Everything's solar power. Wind power. Everything's wind power. I
just like the gears. I like the gears and there's just a lot of mechanical things going on. I just think it's kind of cool. And I guess I like Victorian stuff too. Maybe that's why I have a tendency towards it. Yeah, I'm weird. I'm a theater guy. What do you expect?
I figured it was because you like gears because you're living in Detroit and Michigan.
Yeah, no. You know me. I'm like imprisoned here. I would rather be much, much further out your direction. But
that's why I like so much about it. I know anybody who's in Michigan's imprisoned or not all there.
Actually, I do. I have, I can't, sometimes I forget how long I've actually lived here now. that it's you know, it's crazy to think about it for me, but it has grown on me. I do like there's a lot of trees. The trees are gorgeous, and the lakes are actually pretty cool. And you know that from living in Ohio for so long, you do appreciate the Great Lakes, but still, my heart's in the mountains. It always will be, always will be. But anyway, other news. I know that we've seen a couple stuff that was just sort of posted and announced.
Just today I saw two bits of information. The first one being Tilda Swinton joins Doctor Strange. Now I'm not the most familiar with Doctor Strange's world. I've read one trade paperback that was basically the origin of Doctor Strange, which I found fascinating. I was enamored with, but it's not a comic book that I've read or kept up with or anything like that. So I don't know anything about her character or who she's going to be. Do you?
I know a little bit. I'm with you. I've read like his origin story. And then there's a really good graphic novel out there that if you haven't read Doctor Strange, you might like. It's Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom. So it's got both those really cool characters in it. It explains how Doctor Doom, and some people might not realize this about Doctor Doom, is that he mixes technology with magic. That he has studied magic and he uses it as part of his power. So he's not just like an Iron Man villain, you know, like just in a suit of armor that can fly and shoot lasers and stuff. That he actually incorporates magic into his powers. I had not known that before reading this this graphic novel. At least that's this writer's interpretation of it. Maybe that has been, you know, sort of kiboshed or whatever. But I thought it was really cool because the storyline of it is, and I think it's the artist who does the Hellboy comics. So it's got those, and Mike Mignola, that's the writer for Hellboy. Is he the artist too? I don't know much about
both. Or at least he has done both. I don't know.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's the author of this too. And it's got that really cool art to it too, because he does the supernatural so well. It's got that gritty, you know, kind of Nosferatu slash Cthulhu kind of feel to it, you know. And anyway, Doctor Doom is trying to save his mother's soul from hell, from Mephisto. He's trying to get her soul back from Mephisto because she's trapped there. And so Doctor Strange helps him to do that. It's a pretty cool storyline. What I love about Doctor Strange and why I think he's such an interesting character is he is this sort of fallen hero. You know, he was this master surgeon who, if I remember right, it's hubris. You know, he got too big for his britches, and he tries to do a surgery that he thinks he can accomplish, and he botches it, and it might be because he was drinking already. Because alcoholism is a big part of him too, of his character, and so he really gets smashed, ends up driving his car off a cliff and gets in an accident, and he cripples his hands. So of course he can't be a surgeon anymore. So then he goes on this sort of you know, exile, walk the earth, kind of find himself trip, and that's where he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. He, you know, studies with these monks and all that jazz. To get to the character that this actress is playing, I think she's the Ancient One, and I think she's just the mentor to Doctor Strange, and becomes the one who teaches him all of the magic and is the sort of spiritual guide, because I think eventually that character like dies, but then becomes, you know, the link in the spiritual world. But again, I could be way off. There's nerds out there probably that are going like, oh my gosh, what is he talking about right now? But I think that's it. I was surprised it was a woman that was cast, because if I'm thinking of the right character, he's this like old Asian dude, you know, an old monk.
I remember, yeah, they were up in the mountains, the Tibetan mountains, and I thought it was a monk or something. So I was very surprised to see a woman, because that obviously goes against being a monk. But
yeah,
cool. Tilda Swinton's awesome, but
He is, and Benedict is one of my favorites. I think it's going to be really cool. I'm super excited for it. Obviously, my son is excited for it. If you don't know already, he was at for Halloween and then at Comic-Con, and he's super excited. He loves Doctor Strange mostly because of the cape. My son loves capes, and Doctor Strange does have probably the coolest cape in all of comic books, with maybe Spawn being a rip-off artist, though. I mean, look at Spawn's cape and look at Doctor Strange's, and it is, they are derivative, if nothing else, of each other. But if what's his face, ever drew Doctor Strange, I'm sure his cape would be all crazy all over the place too.
I'm gonna do a quick search and see if Todd McFarlane
ever drew Doctor Strange. Yeah, did he like guest star maybe in a Spider-Man or something like that, and he drew him there. But yeah, so I'm excited for it. Other news that sort of come out is Chris Pine, who most of us know as the latest Captain Kirk, has been cast in Wonder Woman as Steve Trevor. That's the character's name, right? Which is Wonder Woman boy toy, basically. And
I only know because I really didn't follow Wonder Woman. I'm sorry. Until
right.
52, because I'm one of those guys that's like, I don't like just jumping in because I feel like, okay, she's got like 75 years of history, and I'm just going to jump into a storyline. So I really appreciated New 52. I know a lot of uber nerds were like, no, New 52 ruined everything. It's like, shut up. I enjoyed it. So I really enjoyed Wonder Woman, and it was really interesting to see Steve Trevor. Now, I think he was more in the Justice League as a go-between with the government and the Justice League. And the romance with Wonder Woman was in there. But it was a really interesting character, really cool character, because he's sort of a hero in his own right, but he doesn't have superpowers.
Right.
So, and he's not like Nick Fury, where he's a badass but mysterious. He's a true, basically American hero, and I really appreciated that in him.
Yeah, I think it's he's always been an interesting character. I've always found him. I think it's interesting when it doesn't make his character interesting, but story-wise, I think it makes it interesting, or at least the way that you can tell Wonder Woman stories is when he becomes the damsel in distress and Wonder Woman saves him, which happens a lot, especially in the older, comics, or, some of the, in the old television show, it would happen every now and then too. And it just was kind of a fun little gender switch that they had there, because usually had it the other way around. But yeah, you're right. He's sort of, when it comes to Wonder Woman, he's kind of been like shoved to the side, and you're exactly right. He was in the Justice League, and they imply that the two of them had a relationship, and he was part of the reason that she came from Themyscira to Earth, or to man's world to fight crime and all that stuff. But they don't really, at least I haven't read tons of it, where they get they have a current relationship, because of course now they're pushing Wonder Woman and Superman, which drives me crazy. I'm just not a fan of that, because I just think that it's just bleh. I don't know why I don't like it. I just don't. Maybe because I just don't like Superman that much. I don't think he's very interesting.
You kind of always hated Superman.
I have. You know what it is actually for me? It's like the Hollywood couple thing. It's like all of the, like, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. It's just like, it's just boring. Like, it's just boring. They just annoy the crap out of me. It's like, let's just put these two together because it'll sell movies and stuff. I don't know. I'm just being a pessimist, and I just love Batman, so that's why I hate Superman to some extent.
One of my favorite artists, his name is Jock. He's drawn Batman quite a bit, but usually just covers. And we interviewed at Comic-Con 3 years ago, I think. And we asked him about, you draw a lot of Batman. Have you ever done Superman? He goes, I hate drawing Superman. He's so clean. I can't stand drawing him because it's so hard. It's got to be crisp and clean. I hate it. And I'm like, oh, well,
that makes sense, though. Yeah, totally makes sense. So I think Pine's a pretty good fit for that character. Obviously, by casting him, he's not going to be just like he is in Justice League, where he's just this sort of side character. He's going to be, a fairly significant character, I would imagine. It makes me wonder if they're going to tell the whole origin story where his plane crashes, on their island and all that stuff, go back to the old school story, or if they are going to jump right into her being here and have that relationship already established and just go from there. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm curious myself.
And reboot of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I love that comic, and the movie was so stinking terrible that like this is super good news. I don't care how bad it is. It's got to be better than what they did before. What do you know about that? This is the first I've heard of it.
Fox announced that they want to revisit Alan Moore's. Anybody know Alan Moore? He's a kook now.
Now,
otherwise, you're probably a kook yourself, but he's written a lot of wonderful things, but he wrote this wonderful comic called League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which combined your favorite sort of Victorian era time and a lot of these famous literary characters. And I can't think of another movie that wasn't related to Star Wars that I was so excited to go see in the theater. Just so excited. And then upon seeing it, being so devastated. And I've tried to watch it since thinking, well, maybe it was just my expectations. No, that movie is awful. And it's sadly bad. Sean Connery's last movie. He retired. That's how bad it was. Not really.
Yeah.
He didn't retire after that. But it's so bad.
But and he was such a perfect person to cast as Alan Quartermain, too. Like, I can't imagine anybody being better.
Sadly, like, all the casting was pretty good. I didn't have a problem with casting. It's just, I got to say it's a script. It just was not put together well. The writing was bad. You can't put.
They bring in Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer, whichever character it was. It's like, why are you doing that? That's just stupid. It's like, oh, we got to bring an American literary character in because, we can't have all these. We have American audiences. I don't know what their thinking was. And then changing the bad guy to being, the portrait of Dorian Gray. It just was like, why would you not? There's this wonderful graphic novel. It's self-contained in, what is it, like 8 or 12 issues. It's like Watchmen, like it can make its own story. You could, it's there for you. Do Alan Moore's graphic novel. Don't change it. I kind of understand them taking Mina's character and making her vampiric because it adds that Hollywood. That was a Hollywood move to make. So I sort of understood that. But all the other Hollywood moves they made zero sense. And I still would rather see Mina just as Mina because I think she's just cool being that way.
I'm hoping that this was, I think it was about 2003 that the original came out. And I'm hoping it's one of those things where comic book movies have come a long way, and now we have a better idea how to translate them to the big screen versus, I go back, and one of my favorites is X-Men still, X-Men and X-Men 2. And those don't hold up the greatest. They're still good. I still enjoy them. But after seeing like Christopher Nolan's take, even the current X-Men movies, all the Marvel movies, it's like, yeah, those X movies don't really hold up all that well. They're obviously stuck in late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. So I'm hoping that's the problem with the original, and Fox has learned their lesson. They're like, you know what? We're not going to make another Fantastic Four. We're going to make a Days of Future Past sort of thing.
Yeah, hopefully that's the case. It all starts with the script, But if you look at anything else that was Alan Moore, if they can look at the Watchmen and say, look, are there critics of the Watchmen? Sure, and I'm one of them. But it was a good example of saying, look, you can stay true to the medium. And it works, and the fans want to see that. They like it. And so hopefully they kind of they take that. I guess the other example I can think of are the Frank Miller movies, the 300 and Sin City, which, again, I'm not fans of those movies at all because I think Frank Miller's a dirty old man. But they worked. Like as works of media, they were good examples of, look, you can take the pages, you can put them into film, and it does work. Do that. at least do it with the story. You don't have to do it with the art, but do it with the story. Don't make any changes. Make it so that Moriarty, right? It's the villain in the
Yeah.
first series. And you don't find that out till towards the end. But have Quartermain be a heroin addict or opium addict. Have all that stuff that makes those characters these sort of flawed beings, and run with it. It reminds me that I'm going slightly off topic, but I don't know if you've read this series. It's called Five Ghosts.
No.
It's an Image
I think you
comic.
told me about it, but no.
Yeah, if any of our listeners out there are fans of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, they haven't done. Alan Moore hasn't done one since the second run when it was the Martians coming from that storyline. I can't think of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Is the storyline of the second story? Did you? Now I'm really going on another tangent. Did you read that series?
No, I haven't read any of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh my gosh, they're so good. Like you've got to read League of, and this is the English teacher in me talking as he always does and comes out. But League, if you are a fan of literature, particularly of that Gothic literature, late 1800s, Frankenstein and all those, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, all that stuff. Like when you read the graphic novels, you read the comics, there are all these tiny little things in there that are like, a tribute to Tarzan. Here's a tribute to what's his face on Mars, that they just did a movie of that wasn't very good. There's all these little, Alice in Wonderland, there's something from there. There's all these little allusions to those other works that are just so cool if you catch them. And then he did his second series, which got the team back together, and it's the War of the Worlds. The Martians have come, and it's that same exact storyline, and they're the ones fighting the Martians. And then I don't think I ever finished it. I think it was one of those things that, like, it was at a time when I couldn't go to the comic book store because I just didn't have the money anymore, and missed out on the rest of the series. But it sure started out well. But anyway. Now, to bring it back around, Five Ghosts is, if you like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Five Ghosts is right up your alley because you have this character who he's sort of possessed by or embodied with the powers of these really cool literary characters, one of which is Dracula, another is Sherlock Holmes and Robin Hood and stuff like that. And it's really cool, and it's got that same sort of like feel to it of that like late 1800s, early 1900s kind of it also has a very Indiana Jones-ish kind of spin to it too. So something worth checking out. But I'm excited about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It can't be worse than the last one, and let's hope it's closer to the graphic novels that are out there.
I agree. Definitely agree. We also got a tease today from the mutant world of Bryan Singer. And I got to be honest, when I first saw that he teased out an image of the latest mutant, I'm like, ooh, I wonder who it could be. This is awesome. How exciting. And then when I saw who it was, I'm like, who cares? Why? And all I can think of is maybe there's so many people out there now who still don't know most of the mutants. And so this was a big deal to them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I haven't seen the actual image. Is he the big bulked up Caliban, or is he the skinny kind of scraggly Caliban?
It's a good question. I just read that he teased it. I didn't actually see the picture itself.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and all I'm finding is the comic stuff, except for some dude's bald head. And
yeah.
Where is that?
And I'm sorry, I should have said that. That's the mutant character Caliban, and his mutant power. Wait for it. He can hunt other mutants.
Yes.
Whoa. Which is all like X-Force and stuff like that, but it's like whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's sort of like, ooh, yay. I'm not a huge Caliban, but there are people that really like that character. I don't know why. I guess the only thing, I don't know why, but the only thing that might be interesting about it is the storyline that maybe it's suggesting is that you're going to have this character who's being used to go out and find more mutants, which might be really, really interesting because, where we left off with Days of Future Past is you have that sort of splintered effect, where you're not sure where people are going to go and what's going to happen and who's going to join up with who and what mutants are out there and aren't out there and all that stuff. And they've kind of been able to hit the reboot button on everything. And maybe that's what the excitement is. I don't know, but I hear you. Caliban, not all that excited. I was more excited to see the images of Nightcrawler that they put out there. That was cool.
Well, now that we're on the mutant topic, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the comic books X-Men. I'm a big fan of X-Men 1 and X-Men 2. X-Men 3 is not as bad as I remember it, but it's not great. X-Men Origins doesn't exist. X-Men First Class was pretty good. And then Days of Future Past to me was just fantastic. A great way to sort of reclaim this universe and start fresh. But as I was watching it over the weekend again, it hit me a lot of these holes that I'm sure other people have brought up, and I wanted to ask somebody else who was just as nerdy.
Yeah.
One of my biggest problems was we have a timeline set up with 1, 2, and 3. And in 3, Professor Xavier dies.
Right.
But he's in the future in Days of Future Past. So that was problem number 1 for me. How can he be alive in the future if he's dead? And we don't even talk about how he came back.
Did you see the stinger at the end of 3, though?
No, remind me.
There's a stinger at the end of 3, after the credits roll, where there's some dude in a hospital that's all, I think his face is even all bandaged, and basically Professor X has transported his consciousness into this other body.
Okay, I can dig that. No,
yeah, but why does that? So he found Patrick Stewart's clone. Like, how does he still look exactly the same? That's what I want to know. Like,
maybe over time, Patrick Stewart had that ability. Charles Xavier had that ability to make himself look the way he wanted him to look.
Yeah, how many bald British dudes are there? I mean, they all kind of look the same anyway, right?
I'll take that one. But
okay, all right.
Another one that bothered me was, so we have Mystique in 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And played by Rebecca Romijn. And I thought she did a fabulous job.
Ooh, yeah.
They explain in X-Men Days of Future Past that her character is captured in the 70s during this summit, and then she's experimented on, and that's what creates the advancement in the Sentinels.
Right.
I'm like, well, if she was caught then, how would she have ever been in 1, 2, and 3? Because she would have been experimented on, and I got the idea that she was killed. How would she have existed then? Let alone, well, now that it's Sentinels that advanced, and we never really saw, in fact, we didn't see any Sentinels in the first 3 movies that I can remember.
No, I mean, in the Danger Room, they reference one of them.
Yeah, because in the third one, that's right. They reference it. But Mystique, she shouldn't be there then in the first 3 movies, yet she obviously is, according to this timeline. Am I reading that wrong? Am I missing something?
Basically, after the first 3 movies, people were just like, who gives a crap? We'll do whatever we want. And they just went crazy, go nuts with there was no continuity consideration, like, at all. And it drove me batty when First Class came out and all those continuity issues. I mean, I remember writing a whole article about it and how much it really bothered me that it just was sloppy storytelling. I mean, yeah, can you take some liberties? Sure. But they just went and the thing that bothered me was, look, you want this to be you want to reboot the X-Men franchise, then reboot it. Don't tie it to anything from X-Men 1, 2, and 3 and just start it over. And I think this is just a really good example of people making it up as they go. And Days of Future Past was their way of saying, oh my gosh, what have we done? This whole thing is a mess. Like, we need to just hit the reboot button. They're doing what Marvel's doing right now with Secret Wars, and what DC's doing with contingents, or whatever those stupid
Convergence.
stories are. Yeah, convergence. They just want to reboot it, start over. It's fresh, one, because they want to sell comics and they can get people to jump back on again, but basically two, because they're cleaning up the mess, and trying to please as many people as they can, because there's a lot of people out there that aren't digging the new 52. So I think that's what Days of Future Past was.
That's a bummer, because when I remember watching First Class, and my continuity problems were more comic book related. Like, what? You have Havoc in here as a really young dude, yet Scott Summers is his brother who was in the 90s version. That makes no sense. Let alone your First Class is not the First Class that was from the comic books.
Right.
But then when I watched Days of Future Past, I'm like, okay, you solved a lot of those problems with First Class. I dig it. It's gotten better for me. But then watching First Class or Days of Future Past again, I'm seeing more and more of these sort of issues that could have easily just been written off like, okay, they didn't actually capture Mystique. They had a DNA sample or something, or they let her go, or she escaped. Okay, cool. Now she's fine in the other 3 movies.
They don't care. They just they honestly don't care. They just want, like, that's what that whole ending too was. When Wolverine's walking around and Jean Grey's still alive and everything. It was just sort of like, look, everyone, it's over. We can all be happy and love X-Men 1, 2, and 3, but let's put those on our DVD shelves and you can get them out when you want. And now we're gonna go this way. And, Patrick Stewart can retire and he doesn't need to play Professor X anymore. And Ian McKellen, whom I love, can not be Magneto anymore. And I like these new actors that are playing those 2 parts, actually. I think that they're fantastic. But I think they're just like rebooting the whole thing and starting from scratch and saying, here we go. And this next one's going to be set in the 80s, which I'm excited about just because that's when you and I grew up. So it'll be kind of fun seeing all the little, tips of the hat to 80s culture and stuff like that. And frankly, the 80s was like the heyday for the X-Men. I mean, that is when X-Men was like at its biggest. You had giant size X-Men coming out in like the late 70s, but all these characters who we know and love were, their origins are in the early 80s, all the way up until the 90s when you and I were in high school and we bought, X-Men #1 when they branched that off of Uncanny X-Men,
which was awesome. Artwork, very nicely done.
Yes, Jim Lee was at his height and all the rest, and so it I'm excited to see them play with that decade and be able to start over. I love the images that we've seen of Nightcrawler. I don't know if you saw the images. I just saw it of Archangel. Like, I think it's just an artist's rendition of it. But his wings concept, it's just X-Men Apocalypse Angel concept art. If you look that up, it looks pretty sweet.
And is he Archangel then?
Yeah, he's going to be like Archangel.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what it's looking like, Cool. And I'm excited to see Apocalypse. I love him as a villain. I think it's a good way to go. And, it's this whole Caliban fits into that storyline then, because they're all going to be like hunting down where the mutants are, so that you can Apocalypse is all about the mutants are the next step in the genetic evolution, and I'm going to find the strongest of them, and it's basically survival of the fittest. Let's see what happens. And so that makes sense. It seems to lend itself in that direction, because frankly, the Sentinel, humans hate us thing has kind of run its course. I think it's socially relevant. I do like that about it. And I felt the first X-Men films really were pretty progressive in the way they tied the link between mutants and basically, civil rights, particularly with homosexuals. You have that in X2, especially when Iceman has that scene with his parents where they're like, have you tried not being mutant? And that it was obviously very much so a metaphor, an allegory for, the way in which homosexuals are perceived. And I thought that's a pretty cool way to tie it into things that are relevant because, of course, when Stan Lee was writing this, it was very much, about civil rights, but it was about, minorities, blacks and Latinos and everything else. And I think that that's cool, but maybe that story's been told. Now we're going to go in a different direction. I don't know. I'm excited. I love X-Men, though. So you and I both do.
I'm very excited. I'm excited for this one, and I'm really excited about the announced. I hope it keeps going forward. The X-Force movie, because I think that sort of working outside the lines and getting in trouble. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that too. The other thing I thought that was kind of cool was, did you see that Ryan Reynolds was saying that he wants Wolverine to make a cameo in the Deadpool movie?
Yeah, and I've heard speculation that if he does it, Wolverine would use that as his last appearance. I'm sorry, Hugh Jackman would use that as his last appearance as Wolverine. Because, who could kill Wolverine? Well, the only guy that's in the Weapon X program as well.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, it'd be a cool fight. It's sort of one of those Freddy versus Jason, monster versus monster. Who would win? I don't think either of them can die.
No, I don't think so either. And I think if he appears, it's just gonna literally be a cameo. Like it'll be some silly little, bit like he was in First Class when he's flips him off and the rest. But gosh, can you? I mean, isn't Hugh Jackman basically the Harrison Ford of the new generation, where you're like, you just cannot imagine anyone else as Wolverine, just like you cannot imagine anyone else as Han Solo or anyone else as Indiana Jones. Like he just embodies that, and to see, because eventually someone else will play Wolverine, and it's just hard to wrap your mind around that right now.
No, and it's ironic you bring that up because Tom Selleck was supposed to be Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
That's the way it was going to be. And then he couldn't get out of his television contract, so George Lucas and Steven Spielberg called up the old trusty friend of theirs, Harrison Ford, and he did it. And now you're right. It's like, no, nobody else could have done that. And likewise, Hugh Jackman was not supposed to be Wolverine. No. Doug Ray Scott was. And I cannot fathom Doug Ray Scott being Wolverine. It just doesn't work for me.
Well, you remember how upset the nerds were that, here's this 6 foot whatever guy playing Wolverine, and Wolverine has always been known as being short in stature, Sabretooth refers to him in that way all the time. And, so he's supposed to be like 5'4", 5'5", that kind of height. And everybody was super upset about it. But you know what? If the guy embodies the character, it doesn't matter how tall he is. And I think that that's something we can look at Gal Gadot about in particular, who I think's also gotten the same kind of criticism, is that, well, Gal Gadot's, she's such a, she's a little stick. She's not Wonder Woman. She's not, strong enough. She's not busty enough and whatever. And it's like, you know what, guys, like, if she embodies the character, she embodies the character. And, you can look to Hugh Jackman to see that that's the case. And sometimes we nerds get a little bit too, presumptuous about what we think should happen. And then, let these actors do what they're paid to do and see what happens with it. Exactly. So, yeah, excited about that. Anything else in news that's kind of popped up that's current events that we should hit on, or no, that was most of it?
I think that's pretty much most of it. Now that we're doing it actually once a week, we don't have to play catch up so bad. So
you're right. I
think we're staying on top of stuff.
Cool. Any suggestions then? Like we can get back to doing that because it's been a while. It was a regular thing where we would give like a Nerd Cave suggestion, something that just for the adults, or a family suggestion. Either one of those pop in your head. I know we're kind of doing it spur of the moment, but.
You know what? I'll go with. I'm curious because it comes out. May have come out today, or it might be. I saw it came out on our preview list for review. I'm
Okay.
curious to read it, so I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm very curious how it's going to go. It's Fight Club 2
Oh.
by I want to say Dark Horse is putting it out. I'm a big fan of the movie. I think it's
Mhm.
an interesting tale of our society, and I'm very curious because it was very finite at the end. I mean, Tyler Durden's dead because it was all in Ed Norton's head. If you don't know that, I'm sorry I just ruined it for you.
We've
But
had plenty of time to watch
yeah,
that movie.
the banks coming down and they've been
Yeah.
blown up, which is funny because I wouldn't have done anything. It's all electronic. But
Right.
I'm curious, what story do they tell now? What was it, like 20 years later? What are they going to tell? What is Ed Norton's character? What is he going to take down? What's the point? So I'm very curious to read that one.
Yeah, I don't know. Do they take it into that, like, okay, the banks are gone and it did reboot everybody, and now it's this new society that was built up, and maybe it's not what they wanted it to be. That's the only thing I can think of is it's, you flash forward 20 years and this cataclysmic event did happen, and now you have this society that basically started over, but maybe it's just a different version of what was there before, and so you have this sort of underground movement kind of fighting against it as well, that sort of idea of corruption, which I think is also super relevant because some of the things that they were, the flaws that they were poking fun at were just human flaws, and part of the point is that humanity is just inherently like this, and maybe that's what 2 is. I don't know. It'll be interesting. It will definitely be an interesting
Yeah.
comic.
And I'm curious why they chose to go with the comic book medium for the sequel. This isn't based on literature. This is based
Yeah.
on original. This is going to be a comic book.
Now, is it being written by the author of Fight Club or no?
I believe so. If
Hmm.
not, he at least gave him an outline to work from. But from what I understand, I tried not to read too much about it because I wanted to be surprised going into it because I know Fight Club has twists and turns, and I
Yeah,
didn't
you
want
don't
to
want to
ruin that.
ruin that, right?
So I tried to stay away from spoilers and all that, meaning I just stayed away from it completely. But I do believe, yeah, it was the author. I can't think of who wrote Fight Club right now.
I can't off the top of my head either. I know the name, and if I see it, I'll be like, oh, duh.
Yeah, because he did Choke. I got American Psycho's dude in my head. Brent Elias Elias or whatever. I gotta look it up real quick. Anyway, do you have a suggestion?
You know what? My suggestion is, or what I wanted to kind of talk about was I've been reading the Convergence and the Secret Wars, which are, we've talked about how they're both kind of doing the same thing. And I have to say, Convergence is stupid. I hate it. I
Yes.
hate everything about it. It's just completely awful. Like, it is just the worst thing I've ever seen. I cannot stand it. Whereas Secret War, I've only read the first issue. I haven't read the second one, but I love it so much more. You just have the one ultimate universe trying to destroy the 616 universe that we've all grown up with. And it seems like the Fantastic Four from the 616 Earth has kind of grabbed some people and they're getting out of there because everything's blown up. And I'm guessing, and I haven't read 2 yet, so maybe I shouldn't even be talking about this until I've read it, that's where that they create this sort of alternate reality where all of these things come together and they all, have to fight each other and all that stuff, which, we all love. Our 8-year-old selves all love the WWF Battle Royale, right? Where you just like all of them come out, man, like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and, all of them, come out and they all fight until there's just one guy standing. We love that. And that's where you can have some real fun with these things and then also hit the reboot button and figure out where you're going to go from here. And man, Marvel is killing it and DC is just sucking it up. And I'm so disappointed in it. So that would be like my non-recommendation. Like, don't get into Convergence. Wait until that tragedy is over and maybe what comes out of it will actually be something that's pretty good. My suggestion maybe for the Nerd Cave side of things would be, gosh, what it's got to be Image. Like there's just some really good Image stuff that's been out there, and I'm trying to think of something that I haven't already suggested. The only one that's coming to mind, and maybe this isn't even Image, but it's Kelly Sue DeConnick, who writes Captain Marvel, and her series, it's called Bitch Planet. So it's one that definitely I put on the bottom of my pile of comics because I go there with my kids, and so I'm like, oh no, you don't see this. But as I read it, it's definitely like, if you are not a fan of feminism, then don't even buy this. Like it's just going to offend you, and you're going to be mad, and you're going to think all women hate, men and all that stuff. But it's got such a great concept where basically it's this future society where basically they can send any women who are non-conformists, and they actually tattoo them with an NC on their arm, to this whole other planet that's like this giant prison. And that's the concept. And it's like 4 issues in. And basically, it's also going to have this sort of rollerball storyline where I don't know if you know that movie, but basically, like, the idea of violence is entertainment. And so they're going to form this like all-female team that's going to compete in this rollerball tournament. And of course, that's where they're going to kind of make a stand and make a statement. But you've got these, really cool sort of, female characters. But I have to say that sometimes I'm reading this comic as a guy, and I'm like, am I allowed to read this as a guy? Like, there are times where I feel like that it's almost like a woman's only comic. And I know that it's not. And I'm sure, DeConnick would say, like, no, like, men should read this too. But she's obviously writing for women, and she's making some really, like, bold, and I would even say offensive statements. But I think it's good to do that because it gets people to think. And sometimes you have to smack somebody in the face to get them to sort of consider some things. And if you remember that it is satire and she's exaggerating, flaws in our society, then it's not so bad. But it does amuse me because I will be reading it and I do have that sort of feeling of like, I wonder if I'm allowed to read this because I am a dude. So anyway, that's my maybe Nerd Cave's suggestion.
Cool.
So anything family-wise? Like what have you guys, is there something you guys have gone out to do lately? Anything that's been a fun family, the summer's coming up, something that you guys are planning on doing?
We right now, like you, we're just trying to finish up the year, basically. Yep. Get to the finish line.
Yep.
That's always fun. But we've got season tickets to a place called Wet and Wild, which is just a water park. So we'll be going there a lot. This year, or this week, we're getting up into the high 90s, hundreds. First time. So it's
want that.
Awesome. So we'll definitely want it to be at Wet and Wild. But no, it sounds awful. I will. You know what? Yes. I subjected my kids to one of the most awesome events ever all time. I made them watch Game 4 of the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Atlanta Hawks, when Cleveland spanked them by 30 points, even with their C team in.
Yeah,
that was a heck of a family event.
Yeah,
if you can't
tell, Jimmy is very excited about his Cavaliers, which is great.
I am right there.
You deserve to be. You totally deserve to be. And I'm rooting for you guys as well. So.
And don't put the hate comments in the comments below that Cleveland sucks. They're not going to beat the Warriors, presumably. Yeah, I know. I get it. Okay, shut up. Cleveland doesn't have much to celebrate.
That's what people do on the interweb. Don't you know this, Jimmy, by now? Like,
it is. It's so annoying. I made a joke that my birthday is June 11th, and that's the 4th game in the series. And wouldn't it be a great birthday present if the Cavs swept the presumably Warriors? That'd be awesome. So many people, including, I won't name him, but a supposed best friend from high school, made a not nice comment. And I'm like, you're out of the will, buddy. You're done. Done. Exactly.
Yeah, well, that a couple of Super Bowls ago, I had to unfriend some people on Facebook. I was kind of like, I I ended up refriending some of them because I was just ultra sensitive, but they were making some pretty harsh comments. It's like, man, you don't kick a dude while he's down. I mean, I just had to endure like the worst Super Bowl loss since 55-10 against the Niners back when I was like 9 years old. And here you're, just kicking a guy who's going through that trauma yet again. Oh, it was awful.
There's something to be said before the game being like, haha, Denver sucks.
Right.
Then afterwards being like, ooh,
yeah,
no, you don't, you leave it alone. You let it go.
Right. But these are Lions fans that you're talking about. They don't know what to do with anything. Like, they're sore losers, they're sore winners. Like, because they don't know how to win either. So they don't know how to do it with grace or anything. And so if they see anyone who's suffering, they're like, yeah, how's it feel, man? And you're just like, dude, like, at least I've been to a Super Bowl, I guess, but that doesn't really help it, but that's just, you just got to remember, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from self-loathing, man, Jimmy. So if they're giving you a hard time about your calves, it's just somewhere deep inside their moms didn't love them well enough that they feel comfortable.
And our friend, I believe, is a Knicks fan, so he can suck.
Oh, yeah. That is, yeah. Where is he? Enough said. So yeah, I think
he's from the same hometown. I give you leeway because you moved around. I get it. I dig it. Not this guy. I'm like, what? Anyway, enough of that guy.
We went to a Scottish festival, which was really cool. They have one at Alma. It's the Highland Festival, and that was a lot of fun. And I actually bought a cool sword, like a really awesome, like actual authentic. It's just a prop sword. I mean, you can't actually fight evil with it, but being a theater teacher, I'm sure I will use it in some sort of play at some point down the line.
As a side note, they came down to basically two schools, and Alma was the other one. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had a great soccer coach there, and I almost went there.
Cool. Alternate universe, Days of Future Past. Jimmy goes to Alma.
Exactly. And gets stuck in Michigan.
Well, I think that's a pretty good show today. I really do.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've done good. We'll have to work a little harder, I guess, on getting news because usually we're so far behind. We're playing catch up.
Yeah, but we hit some pretty major stuff, and we did some nice little tangents. But the other thing we should do is get back to those usual kind of things that we've done, the trends that we've done in the show, of like the recommendations for family and that kind of jazz, and we'll get those out to you guys, especially with the summer coming up. It's nice I know that several of my friends have been like, oh, that was cool that you suggested that because I totally tried it out and it was great. So we'll get back on that too.
Good idea. And on the flip side, guys, those of you watching, please send us your suggestions. We want to hear from you.
Yes.
We want your feedback, especially if you go back to our original shows. Give us those fails. We want to hear about your parenting fails. Those are hilarious. But if you have recommendations and stuff like that, send those in too.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
All right then, guys. As always, check us out on Nerdlocker on youtube.com/2nerdydads or youtube.com/Nerdlocker, Twitter Nerdlocker, Facebook Nerdlocker, Nerdlocker.com, iTunes, everywhere you want to be. Other than that, what do you guys say, Jason?
Hey, have a nerdy week, everybody.